Okay, here. So I wanted to show you article I saw from CNBC that was I thought was a really good article, and has a lot of data from Black Knight, which is a Black Knight is a mortgage data and analytics firm, and I really like Black Knight. They have really good information, and if you're not familiar with Black Knight, highly recommend you follow their data. So we're just going to go through the article, and one of the things I'm struggling with as a professional right now, and doing videos and getting them out to you guys, is that there's so much information happening right now. It's just like a barrage of info, and the market is changing so fast. So we're going to try to get it out to you as fast as possible and do our best. But I thought this was a good place to start. It's really good information, and I'll just walk you through it, and it's going to be pretty unedited. So take it for what it is, and you'll see some bloopers, I'm sure. So let's get going. So this is an article from CNBC, and basically home prices fell for the first time is the report in 3 years, and it was the biggest decline since 2011. And if you're like me, you're reading a lot of news articles the last, however long, few months, where we're seeing a lot of, quote, experts saying that prices are not going to fall. And I'm having like deja vu to 2008, where market's fine, prices aren't going to fall. And then, like, everything they said wasn't going to happen happens. And I think that's what's going to happen. Prices are going to fall. It just seems like a no-brainer, especially from the data I'm seeing. And we're starting to see in the news the same things happen. It's been painful the last year or so. I mean, even you go back a year or 2 years or 3 years, and you can see the same news headlines. I wasn't sure if it was 2020 or 2021 or 2022, or if it was 2005, 2006, or 2007 or 2008, because it was like they copy pasted the news headlines. And this is an example where now we're starting to see the data of what experts haven't been saying was, what they said wasn't going to happen is happening. So let's go through the article here. Home prices fell for first time in 3 months, or 3 years last month, and biggest decline since 2011. So here's the thing. When real estate happens slowly, and what I see happening when events like this happen is that it happens slowly, and that gives a lot of people excuses to interject all sorts of reasons why people ought not to be concerned. Here's example number one. Okay. First off, this was the biggest decline since 2011. That should be the first red flag. That's a big deal. And the first bullet point here is that home prices declined 0.77% from June to July. This is a national news article. 0.77% doesn't seem like a lot, but it is, because this is a national data. Kitsap County saw a 10% decline in median home price from June to July. Now that's a smaller data set and a smaller data pool. So, it could go back up. It's going to kind of do this a little bit, I would expect. That would be normal. And you can see that on the charts. So I wouldn't be too alarmed for 10%. It might be more like in reality, when it averages out more of a 6%, it's still significant. When we look at the price reductions we're seeing in the market, they're averaging out to 6%, almost 7%, like 6.4 or 6.8, something like that. So that's telling us, that's a leading indicator. It's telling us what's coming down the pipe. Okay. And so 0.77% decline doesn't seem like a large percentage, but it is. Okay, second point, key point in this article is while the drop may be small, it's the largest single month decline of prices since January 2011. So last time we saw a price decline this large was during the recession. And folks, that's a big deal. I would take note of that. So the second part of that sentence on the second bullet point on this article is that it's the second worst July performance dating back to 1991. Those of you who are old enough, and I'm barely old enough, I barely remember the 91 recession. I was a kid. I was 17, 18 years old at the time, but I remember it was bad, and I was affected. My family was affected, and that was a big deal back then. So here's the third point that isn't noted in this article is that home prices in July almost always go up, even in recessions. We saw home prices go up slightly in June, July, May through July-ish during the recession in our area, because that's when families are moving. They're getting, purchasing homes to get ready for the school year. So a July decline in home prices, big deal. Okay. Third point of this article, further price corrections are likely on the horizon as we move into what are typically more neutral seasonal months for the housing market. Okay, and this is true. So we just hit the kind of the meat of our housing market, the active part of the housing market. Typically May through July, we'll see house prices go up, more sales activity, etc. Now we're heading into a time of the year where it's pretty common to see housing inventory decline slightly, sales decline slightly, and prices decline slightly. We haven't seen that in the last 5 years, but we typically see that. So, as we do these housing reports, shouldn't be too shocked if we see those types of stats. Okay. Keep going on here. So while this 0.77%, this article says while 0.77% might seem small, it's the second worst July performance dating back to 1991, and it's behind the only July performance that was worse than this was July 2010. And that was during the Great Recession. Okay. What I find interesting about this is that we're just starting this process, and we're seeing the second largest decline in house prices during July, only to be beat out by a price decrease that happened a 0.9%. It was 0.9%, to give you some perspective. Price decrease in July of 2010, which was the heart of the Great Recession. You guys all following this? We've just started this process, and we're already in second place. We've just started this, and we're already in second place. It's like we're having a meal, and they, I was thinking, this is the appetizer. And I'm like, this isn't even the appetizer. We're just getting the water served. Okay. I find this really, really interesting. Article, Black Knight is saying they believe it's a sharp and fast rise in mortgage rates that has caused this price decrease to happen. Not surprising. I think it's that combined with housing affordability. There's a huge discrepancy in many housing markets throughout the United States between wages and home prices. And every time you get a large discrepancy between wages and median household income, there becomes a stalemate eventually. And it does talk about this. It does mention that housing affordability is at its lowest level in 30 years. Which is in line with that 1991 statistic. Okay, so if housing affordability is at its lowest point in 30 years, and this is a stat that is making us remember the recession of 1991, which was 30 years ago. Makes sense. Okay. So I wanted to show this article to you. I thought it was really good. It does talk in here, prices historically rise on average 0.4% between June and July because the market's heavily weighted towards people purchasing. And again, we had to see a price decline in July is very significant. And so I'm thinking, okay, if we're already seeing a price decline in July, wow. We're also seeing, though, there's a lot of things going on. We're seeing a reduction in listings, and it's possible that homeowners just park. They just sit out. And if we have no homes to sell, no buyers to buy, that makes a housing standstill. And that's called the transactional crash, where there's no homes to sell, no buyers to buy, so no transactions are happening between parties. And that can also be a really bad situation economically because no money's being exchanged. And so we could have that. I think it's going to be temporary if it happens. I'm only guessing. All of us are simply, looking at probabilities. I have several scenarios that I think that might happen. That might be a fun video to put out. I don't see how a price correction cannot occur at some point down the line. I think we're going to see in Kitsap County some price corrections happen this year between now and the end of the year, in the 5 to 15% range. And that's significant. We already saw 10%, but it could come up. This is all when it averages out, I'm saying. But I think we're going to really start to see stuff in 2023, 2024. And there's the big debate about foreclosures, if we'll see foreclosures or not. And I do think we're going to start to see foreclosures, mostly if we start to see job losses. And the big, we do have some foreclosures starting to enter the market. We've been getting some foreclosures starting to come in slowly, still very low from historical standards. But if you go back to 2005, 06, 07, etc., we're kind of in line with what we saw back then. A different animal this time, but the result might be the same. Okay, so anyhow, this is a great article. We'll put a link in the description. Its home prices fell for first time in 3 years last month, and it was the biggest decline since 2011 CNBC article. And the data's from Black Knight. And I think that's the important thing here. Black Knight's a good resource. Okay, thanks for joining us.